we are still in this world of falsehood, and it is not easy for me to read it, so please bear with me, because it takes all the strength in my soul and my consciousness to try to aspire to bring out what Sri Aurobindo has gone through, what he has had to suffer for us. So I will begin now because it's 6:33. Always the dark adventurers seem to win. Nature they fill with evil's institutes, turn into defeats the victories of truth, proclaim as falsehoods the eternal laws, and load the dice of doom with wizard lies. The world's shrines they have occupied, usurped its thrones. In scorn of the dwindling chances of the gods, they claim creation as their conquered fief, and crown themselves the iron lords of time. I'm going to go a little slower today to speak of some of the definitions Sri Aurobindo is using. A fief is a territory, a domain, or estate, especially in the times of the feudal lords. And then he has the word next, adepts of the illusion and the mask. An adept is one who is completely versed in something, thoroughly proficient, well-skilled and expert. The artificers of nature's fall and pain. And the artificer is an interesting word, and Yeats uses it very well, as does Sri Aurobindo, of course. An artificer is usually a skillful or artistic worker, a craftsperson. The artificers of nature's fall and pain have built their altars of triumphant night in the clay temple of terrestrial life, in the vacant precincts of the sacred fire, in front of the reredos in the mystic rite. The reredos are ornamental screens or decorations in the back of an altar, in the form of a hanging or a tapestry or a painting. So in front of the reredos in the mystic rite, facing the dim velamen, nothing can pierce. A velamen, of course, is a membranous covering. Intones his solemn hymn, the mitred priest. Now, a mitre is, of course, a liturgical headdress, like one worn by a bishop or an abbot, especially in the Western churches. Invoking their dreadful presence in his breast, attributing to them the awful name, he chants the syllables of the magic text and summons the unseen communion's act, while twixt the incense and the muttered prayer, all the fierce bale with which the world is wrapped is mixed in the foaming chalice of man's heart and poured to them like sacramental wine. We see here so much that Sri Aurobindo has taken from actually aspects of Western Christianity. The Communion's Act, the incense, the muttered prayer. The bale is, of course, evil or woe, suffering, pain. And rack is torment or anguish. And all of that is mixed in the foaming chalice of man's heart. Again, the chalice. And I remember, of course, when I was young and my parents were church-going people, the priest would hold up the chalice and pour it like sacramental wine. The references to the communion service of the church. Assuming names divine, they guide and rule. Opponents of the highest, they have come out of their world of soulless thought and power to serve by enmity the cosmic scheme. Night is their refuge and strategic base. Against the sword of flame, the luminous eye, bastioned, they live in massive forts of gloom, calm and secure in sunless privacy. Bastioned is a fortified position, a defensive stronghold that we see in the armies when they have these fortified positions. No wandering ray of heaven can enter there. Armored, protected by their lethal masks, as in a studio of creative death, the giant sons of darkness sit and plan. I have to go to the next page. The drama of the earth, their tragic stage. Doesn't it seem that Sri Aurobindo is speaking about things today? We look at all these things, horrible things happening in the Olympics. The flag was hung upside down. I won't go any further. All who would raise the fallen world must come under the dangerous arches of their power. For even the radiant children of the gods, to darken their privilege is, and dreadful right. None can reach heaven who has not passed through hell. These powerful lines, so applicable to us. Yes, we want to reach heaven, all of us, or not the heaven of the world of cults and saints and religions, but the realization of unity with the divine. And we cannot reach there if we have not passed through hell. And that is why we have taken birth into this body. The gods will have none of it. The gods are fixed beings. They're very happy with the powers they have. And when Mother asks some of them to take birth, they refuse. But when we take birth into a human form, coming from our heights and our resting place, we have to go through the hells of this world. This, too, the traveler of the worlds must dare. A warrior in the dateless dual strife, he entered into dumb, despairing night, challenging the darkness with his luminous soul. This is the Avatar. This is Ashwapati. Alarming with his steps the threshold gloom, he came into a fierce and dolorous realm, peopled by souls who never had tasted bliss, ignorant like men born blind who know not light. They could equate worst ill with highest good. Virtue was to their eyes a face of sin, and evil and misery were their natural state. A dire administration's penal code, a penal code we know is a code that deals with crimes and punishment, making of grief and pain the common law, decreeing universal joylessness, had changed life into a stoic sacrament, and torture into a daily festival. An act was passed to chastise happiness, to discipline or punish, especially by beating. Laughter and pleasure were banned as deadly sins. A questionless mind was ranked as wise content. A dull heart's silent apathy as peace. Apathy, of course, is insensibility to passion or feeling. Sleep was not there. Torpor was the sole rest. Torpor is a state of lethargy, dormancy. Death came, but neither respite gave nor end. Always the soul lived on and suffered more. Ever he deeper probed that kingdom of pain. Around him grew the terror of a world of agony, followed by worse agony. And in the terror, a great wicked joy, glad of one's own and others' calamity. There, thought and life were a long punishment. The breath a burden, and all hope a scourge. The scourge is a severe punishment, usually with a whip, a flogging. The body, a field of torment, a massed unease. Repose was waiting between pang and pang. This was the law of things none dreamed to change. A hard, somber heart, a harsh, unsmiling mind, rejected happiness like a cloying sweet. Cloying is excess. Tranquility was a tedium and ennui. Ennui, a feeling of utter weariness and discontent, boredom. Only by suffering, life grew colorful. It needed the spice of pain, the salt of tears. If one could cease to be, all would be well. Else, only fierce sensations gave some zest. A fury of jealousy burning the gnawed heart. The sting of murderous spite and hate and lust. The whisper that lures to the pit and treachery stroke through vivid spots on the dull, aching hours. When something is gnawed, it's troubled or tormented by constant annoyance. To watch the drama of infelicity, the writhing of creatures under the harrow of doom, and sorrow's tragic gaze into the night, and horror and the hammering heart of fear were the ingredients in time's heavy cup that pleased and helped to enjoy its bitter taste. Now this idea of the harrow, this harrow of doom. Technically, a harrow is a farm implement, and it's used to break up and even off plowed ground. So we have, of such fierce stuff was made up life's long hell. These were the threads of the dark spider's web, in which the soul was caught, quivering and wrapped. This was religion. This was nature's rule. In a fell chapel of iniquity, gross injustice or wickedness, we could say, infamy, depravity. To worship a black, pitiless image of power, kneeling, one must cross hard-hearted, stony courts, a pavement like a floor of evil fate. Each stone was a keen edge of ruthless force, and glued with the chilled blood from tortured breasts. The dry, gnarled trees stood up like dying men, stiffened into a pose of agony. Gnarled, knotted, misshapen trees. And from each window peered an ominous priest, chanting Te Deums for slaughter's crowning grace. Te Deum is an ancient liturgical hymn, literally, the God we praise, a service of thanksgiving in which the recital of this hymn forms a part. And here we have this ominous priest chanting Te Deums for slaughter's crowning grace. Uprooted cities, blasted human homes, burned writhing bodies, the bombshells massacre. Our enemies are fallen, they sang. All who once stayed our will are smitten and dead. How great we are, how merciful art thou. Thus thought they to reach God's impassive throne, and him command whom all their acts opposed, magnifying their deeds to touch his skies and make him an accomplice of their crimes. Their no relenting pity could have place, but ruthless strength and iron moods had sway, and dateless sovereignty of terror and gloom. This took the figure of a darkened God, revered by the racked wretchedness he had made. Racked, extreme pain, distress, anguish, who held in thrall a miserable world. Thrall is servitude or bondage. And helpless hearts nailed to unceasing woe, adored the feet that adored the feet that trampled them into mire. It was a world of sorrow and of hate. Sorrow with hatred for its lonely joy. Hatred with others' sorrow as its feast. A bitter rictus curled the suffering mouth. A rictus is a gaping grimace, especially of the mouth. A tragic cruelty saw its ominous chance. Hate was the black archangel of that realm. It glowed a somber jewel in the heart, burning the soul with its malignant rays, and wallowed in its fell abysm of might. These passions, even objects, seemed to exude, for mind overflowed into the inanimate that answered with the wickedness it received. Against their users, used malignant powers, hurt without hands, and strangely, suddenly slew, appointed as instruments of an unseen doom. Or they made themselves a fateful prison wall, where men condemned wake through the creeping hours, counted by the tollings of an ominous bell. An evil environment worsened evil souls. All things were conscious there, and all perverse. In this infernal realm he dared to press, even into its deepest pit and darkest core. Perturbed its tenebrous base, dark and gloomy, tenebrous, perturbed its tenebrous base, dared to contest its ancient privileged right and absolute force. In night he plunged to know her dreadful heart. In hell he sought the root and cause of hell. Its anguished gulfs opened in his own breast. He listened to clamors of its crowded pain, the heartbeats of its fatal loneliness. Above was a chill deaf eternity. In vague, tremendous passages of doom, he heard the goblin voice that guides to slay, and faced the enchantments of the demon sign, and traversed the ambush of the opponent snake. In menacing tracks, in tortured solitudes, companionless he roamed through desolate ways, where the red wolf waits by the fordless stream, and death's black eagles scream to the precipice, and met the hounds of Baal who hunt men's hearts, baying across the velds of destiny, in footless battlefields of the abyss, fought shadowy combats in mute eyeless depths, assaults of hell endured and tightened strokes, and bore the fierce inner wounds that are slow to heal. I will stop there for today, and I'd like to perhaps explain a little bit of these previous passages next week, because Purani in his book on Savitri and his talks on Savitri speaks of these goblin voices. He speaks of the red wolf waiting by the fordless stream. And I'm sure that, and death's black eagles, I'm sure, and the hounds of Baal. Vladimir, could you begin with some of that next week? I'm sure you know this very well.
Right. These are the imagery from the Veda, yes.
Yes, so if you could begin that next week, and then we'll carry on.
Okay.
Good. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
And namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.